Brandon Strauss, co-founder and president of CapTrav, who will talk to you about data, one of the most important parts of communicating out, communicating up. So Brandon, welcome to the stage.
Appreciate it. Thanks. I was going to say it's a good thing you didn't say dancing was a requirement, because I'd have been out of here very quickly. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brandon Strauss. I'm the president of CapTrav, and I'm one of the co-founders and partners of Kessel Run Corporate Travel Solutions. So I appreciate you guys having us here. I also apologize in advance because I had my black dollar store cheaters that were broken in Penn Station, so I had to go to the red ones with the rhinestones. So I hope I am not. My wife says I need to get real ones, but I have resisted, but that's coming to an end pretty quick, I guess, particularly if I mess up the video for all of this. But first of all, I just want to sort of express appreciation for all the support that World Travel has given me and my company over the years. Particular appreciation to Natalie and Ivan and Liz for supporting our efforts around CapTrav, account management team, sales team, and particularly during COVID when, even though you guys didn't lay anyone off or furlough anyone, I know everyone's been, extremely, sensitive about resource allocation and making sure that, the business was running smoothly. So really appreciate all the help and support. I think it says a lot about the company, for sure, your support of us. So ironically, World celebrates its 40th birthday this month. Kessel Run, a management consulting company we're focused on nothing but corporate travel optimization. We celebrate our 20th anniversary at some point this week 20 years ago. So we sat literally at my kitchen table 20 years ago, and we started in the A's in the phone book on my landline. A phone book, there are actual pages. And our first clients 20 years ago were Airlines International, Acuity Brands, AJC Enterprises, and AFC Enterprises. And by no means am I trying to tell you we had wild success during those times. It took a very, very long time for us to find success. But over time, the message that we had started to resonate. Over a 20-year period of time, we've had the ability to help engage and provide solutions for primarily US-centric multinational clients of all sizes. And we've worked with some of the largest professional service companies in the world, largest financial services companies in the world, largest manufacturing companies in the world. And in every case, when a client would come to us, they'd come to us with some sort of acute problem. And that problem was either, hate my TMC, got to get rid of them, got to find someone else. CEO missed their plane, so it must be World Travel Inc.'s fault. Got to get rid of them, got to go somewhere else. Need a new duty of care solution, need a new payment solution. CFO ate rubber chicken at the Hilton, they didn't like it, so we got to get them out of our travel program. Always some sort of acute problem. We would solve that problem to the best of our ability. And in every case, the next question is always the same. Okay, now how do we save money? Now we have to save money. That's the next thing we have to do. There's really two ways that we can go about that. The first is to squeeze, right? We can go back to the TMC and say, we need a little bit of a better deal on that booking engine. We need you to lower your fees here. I need a win. We can go to a supplier and we can squeeze a little bit more out of our discount program or whatever the case might be. And we had some success doing that. But the other place that we would look for opportunity would really be within that bit of business that wasn't going through the TMC. There was always more opportunity there, more opportunity to get data that wasn't coming through the travel agency or the TMC, so that we could leverage that. We could either leverage that from a duty of care perspective or leverage that from a supplier leverage perspective or whatever the case might be. This isn't just me either that is sort of making that statement. If we go back 20 years to when we started the company, all of the mega TMCs were searching for that exact same problem. They were trying to figure out a solution to that exact same problem. How do we leverage that spend that's not going through our systems? I'll get a little more detail in that here in a few minutes, but suffice to say that all of those efforts 20 years ago failed. Today, with CapTrav, what I kind of want to talk to you about today is how we've chased that solution. This sort of provides the entire punchline of the presentation, and hopefully it's provocative enough to where you're looking at it and you're saying, yeah, that's, I don't know, maybe. Is that right? And if you're thinking that, that's good, because I want it to be a little bit provocative, and I don't want you to totally agree with it. But I do want you to give me the opportunity to indulge me a little bit for the next 15 minutes or so. And let me try to sort of walk you through why I think what I'm saying here is right. If we can, though, what I want to do is kind of separate this into a couple of little buckets. So the first would be, what is program leakage? What is this idea around booking outside of your agency of record? Why does it happen? How can we eliminate it? And then the second piece that I want to talk about is, how can we fix it? And is this really the magic bullet that I'm saying it is? And at the end of this, you can decide if what I'm saying makes sense or not. So what we have found is, even in the most well-run travel program, 20% or more of air is leakage. 20% or more of air is being booked outside of the TMC. 40% plus, 40, 50, 60% hotel leakage. 20% plus car leakage. Don't just take my word for it. There are plenty of industry studies that back this up. And if you look at the industry over the past 20 years plus, the industry has also tried to address this problem. In 2004, when the GDSs were deregulated, airline competition was sort of reborn. With that rebirth of airline competition, if you've been around long enough in the business, you'll remember very opaque contracts between the air and the GDSs, where there were carve-outs for web-only content. And we didn't have a real clear picture around how much content we were going to get in the GDS or how much we were going to lose in the GDS. But the one thing we did hear from travelers, Bob down the hall in his cubicle would say, I can find it cheaper on Expedia. And you might argue that even during that time, in the early 2000s, when all of the mega TMCs were searching and developing technology around what we coined super PNR, which was essentially bringing in disparate booking sources no matter where it was booked, you could argue that they did that as a direct response to GDS deregulation and because people could find it cheaper somewhere else. It's a hard argument to make. In the early 2000s, with airline overrides, commissions, and really strong incentive programs from the airlines to either TMCs or from the airlines direct to corporate clients, it was very easy for TMCs to prove, and we used to do it all the time, that even though you might find it a little bit cheaper every once in a while, sorta, kinda, on the web, that over time, in aggregate, a corporate travel program that's well managed with good discounts in place always won. Over a period of time, it was better not to waste your time searching on Orbitz or Priceline. It was better to use the managed program. So the idea that TMCs were spending a tremendous amount of money to chase this problem because of deregulation is not the best argument. TMCs knew in the 2000s that program leakage was real, and they knew that they needed to get this data, and they all spent millions and millions of dollars pursuing this. So this is not an idea that I made up. So there's two ways really to go after program leakage. The first is you can either drive compliance through travel policy or through some other way. Or the second would be to try to figure out a way to capture and aggregate disparate booking source data from wherever it may come. Let's first look at compliance. So the first thing we have to do if you're considering compliance is you have to understand who the audience is. The audience being our traveler, right? Who our consumer is. This is not a new report. This is an old Pew Research study report. I've used this slide, many, many times. In 2016, millennials became the largest generation in the labor force. Today, millennials make up a big portion of our senior leadership team and executive management teams. People make the argument all the time, and I hear it from clients all the time, that COVID changed everything. COVID was the inflection point of change in the industry that changed everything. The argument that we make, and I like to make, is I don't think COVID changed as much as we think. I think the industry changed, or I think the consumer demographic has changed many years ago, and the industry just hasn't kept up. And the industry now realizes that things have indeed changed. Follow this logic with me a little bit more, just sort of keeping in mind the comment about millennials and how the consumer demographic has changed. But we sort of go from up to down, and think to yourself as you're looking at this, and we think about the changes that American Airlines have made specifically with respect to taking content out of the GDS, think about NDC, and what we hear a lot among people in the industry is they have no idea what they're doing. They have no clue. It's all going to backfire. The whole thing's going to blow up. You either have to believe that, or you have to believe that supplier strategy is really aligning with our changing user demographic. And to me, at least in my view, this makes sense. So baby boomers, and all of this data comes out of a March article that I pulled from Business Magazine. So this is not stuff that I've made up. This is information that I've pulled out of periodicals, and it largely supports a lot of research that I've been doing over the past several years in this topic. So if you look at kind of the profile of boomers, loyal to employers, strong work ethic, makes personal sacrifices for work gains, kind of aligns with what you might think if you think about travelers holding on to legacy solutions, if you think about the idea of travel policy, travel mandates, these things kind of make sense. As we start to move down, we look at Gen X, that's me, 53. I think this describes me pretty well. I seek efficiencies. I'm adaptive, slightly resistant to change. I could use a booking tool. I kind of prefer not to, but I'll do it. Policy works for me unless it's dumb, and if it's dumb, I'm gonna complain. I'll complain. At worst, I'm gonna do what I'm told. But what I might do is not do what I'm told, but I'm gonna have a justification in my hip pocket for not doing it just in case. That's my generation, right? Millennials. So this is the group. This is our audience now. This is who TMCs and suppliers have to work toward. These are our senior. This is senior leadership now, and this is executive level, the largest segment in the workforce. So highly competitive, achievement-focused, tech-savvy, brand loyal. You will not read one article that talk about millennial that don't talk about brand loyalty. It's a very important topic to understand, particularly as we start to get into the next slide that talks about the strategic decisions that suppliers have made with respect to how they're going after the consumer. And then lastly, Gen Zers, who I've read are about to take over or have taken over the global population, and while they haven't taken over the workplace, that's coming. And this, the big thing here is that this is really kind of characterized as the first true tech generation. We're now at a point that's well over my head. beyond my understanding, and by the time they take over the workforce, I'm hoping I'm no longer in any business. But it's easy to see, hopefully, that the changing demographic, by definition, forces us to change the way we think about the way we work and the way we approach our clients and the way we approach how we're servicing them from a travel management perspective. Let's take it one step further and just think not only about what consumer demographics look like, let's think about the massive pivot that suppliers have made, just in terms of what they've said. Historically, suppliers meaning primarily air and hotel, have always said, you know, we really support our TMC partners, and we really value these relationships. And at the same time, behind the scenes, they're saying, but we'd really like to mitigate GDS distribution fees. We'd really like to figure out a way to get more in front of the client. And keep in mind the demographic that they were working toward, you know, while making these decisions. Today, we're not hearing that message. Today, the message that we're hearing is much more blunt and it is much more direct. And they're talking about intentions to establish brand loyalty through modern retailing channels, which to me are basically euphemisms or code for we want you to book through our website. We want direct supplier relations. A recent article that I didn't add here, and there's even another example from Travelport, but I read in an article just last week that travel managers are now starting to block AA content from their booking engines. But at the same time, AA capacity data shows that American Airlines' dominance in its primary markets are now higher than they were pre-pandemic. The point is that suppliers have leverage and they understand the consumer profile. And hotel and air are seeking brand loyalty among a consumer demographic that like to be brand loyal. I think that's really important. Travelport came out with a study, I think it was maybe a few days ago. I was traveling, I didn't read the whole thing, but stuff like this now is coming out all the time. Interestingly, the Travelport study, and again, I didn't read it, so I won't get this totally correct, but it was a consumer study that wasn't necessarily focused on the travel sector specifically, but it was focused on consumer behavior. Was a survey against, I believe, 2,000 people ages 18 and up, but it was more of a general consumer survey that spoke to a lot of these same topics that we're talking about now. I've read, there's just too many quotes to provide, but I've read this one from the company Dime probably 40 times because being in the corporate travel business for so long, my jaw just kind of hits the floor as I read something like this. And I'll read it because I think it's worthwhile with my red glasses. But regarding AA's content strategy, the company Dime reported, this is back in just February of this year, a soul-searching exercise that has AA de-emphasizing perks and benefits for managed travel programs and their corporate travel agency partners in favor of a direct relationship with travelers. If you've been in the business for more than 10 years, you've never heard anything like this. Never heard anything like this. And the moves that they've made within their organization give you a lot of support that says this is not something that's going to be going away anytime soon. The SVP at Red Roof, just talking in a hotel news article, this was just a few weeks ago, discussing customer segmentation, purchasing habits. How do we get more customers in front of the brand? Do you think the answer to that is a drop-down box and Concur? I don't think so. So by now, you probably have guessed that I don't think compliance, 100% compliance, is gonna be very successful. Haven't seen any data in my 20 years to suggest that that anything particularly will work. I did not see any compliance shift during COVID, even though COVID shut down everything. People still did travel. It wasn't as much, but it happened. We saw the exact same amount of leakage during COVID. We've seen the exact same amount of leakage post-COVID. I haven't seen any data or seen any survey to suggest otherwise. So if you buy into that idea that leakage is an issue, then the question becomes, well, how do I get that data? So in 2000, I was working for BCD, and I was part of a team called Project Renaissance. Project Renaissance was basically super P&R. So we worked for years, and they spent millions of dollars. American Express was doing the exact same thing at the time. Carlson Wagonlit was doing the exact same thing at the time, chasing down super P&R technology, the ability to bring in disparate data sources into a single P&R and be able to service those reservations. All of them failed, and we'll talk about why in a minute. 15 years later, I brought this question to our CTO at Captrav at the time, just a friend, and I said, can we figure out a way to capture disparate booking source data? Why? Because for 15 years, I had been working with so many clients, and I had been asked this question, how do I save money? And I knew that if we could get our hands around that data, that they would be successful and we'd be successful. So we did what most people would do in the corporate travel space. We said, let's go look at credit card data, and we'll see how we can do that from a reconciliation perspective. And indeed, level 3 credit card data would give us a lot of what we need. However, most companies don't get it, and a lot of credit card companies really don't provide it. Even when they do provide it, getting the granular level of detail that you really need is quite difficult. So if you've tried to reconcile credit card and TMC data, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. The other thing is credit card data doesn't normalize supplier names, so particularly normalizing hotel names. Card statement, invoice, transaction dates don't match very well, so credit card data becomes very difficult. We looked at expense data. If anyone set up an expense system, if you're on the finance side and you're now in travel, you probably know that you've taken a very minimalistic approach to capturing expense data to make it as easy for the user as possible. What does that mean? What that means is we're not getting the kind of information that we need out of expense to really be effective for travel management purposes. No one puts in city pair codes, fare classes, and all the ticket numbers, advanced purchase information, and all the kinds of things that we would need in an expense report to have effective information in support of a travel management program. And if you think about all of the money that's been spent, think about what Concur has done with TripLink. Think about what companies like Spotnana, Onriva, TripActions, all of these companies, probably upwards of $1 billion spent, all with different business models, but all essentially chasing the same idea, right? A ubiquitous way to bring in multi-GDS content, direct connects, NDC, et cetera, all in an effort to create a marketplace or a solution where we get all of the data that we need in one place. At the end, though, what we figured out, or what we decided, was that the very best way to get the very best data is directly from a supplier or directly from the booking source. So if you book a reservation on Concur through World, the best possible data source would be getting that Concur reservation from World. If you book through a travel counselor from World, the very best data that we could get would be that confirmation that was booked from that travel counselor from World. Same thing with Marriott, same thing with American Airlines, et cetera, same thing with Expedia. So that's the direction we went in with Captrav. So we're capturing data via either hotel receipt data or through email data, and we're putting all of that into a system. If we sort of roll the clock back to 2000 and we look at super P&R efforts, the computing power just wasn't there. as one example of where kind of the fail occurred. It would take hours in the year 2000 to process 1,000 transactions. Today, we can process 1,000 transactions simultaneously in a matter of seconds. But what I will tell you, as we get into exactly what we're doing, that 2 years in, I met with my former boss, Danny Hood, who was the president of BCD, and I sort of sat him down and I talked to him about what we were doing, and I asked him if he wanted to be on our board of directors, and he had all these notes, and he said, yeah, and you'd be able to solve a problem. I might have lost my microphone. Did I lose it? Back on? So with that, he joined our board. We started continuing to develop it. Ran into so many problems, which I'll describe. Some are pretty funny. But 3 years later, we think we have this pretty much licked. And I'll add, I think World Travel Inc. thinks we have it pretty much licked too. So very appreciative. We are sort of right at the end of fully integrating our solution into World Travel Analytics. So as a World Travel Inc. customer, you'll be able to not only see all of the reservations that are booked through World Travel, but you'll also be able to see all of the reservations that are booked off-channel. And all of the benefit, potentially, yeah. And I would add a couple of things. Number one, we started pursuing this relationship with Ivan and his team during the pandemic. And I think it's a great testament that when most companies were just trying to survive, World was already thinking ahead. And we've gotten a tremendous amount of support around this and a real recognition in terms of the value a solution like this might bring, a solution that many people have spent tens of millions of dollars on over the past 20 years to accomplish. I'll also add that the decision was made on World Travel's part to help us with this and to integrate this solution into their tech stack before American Airlines made this announcement about content. So this was not a knee-jerk reaction to American pulling content out of the GDS. It was a business decision based on a recognition that having data like this would add a lot of value. But I will tell you, and then I'll flip through because I know everyone wants to eat lunch, that this stuff is not easy to do, and there's a reason why lots of people failed, and we continue to make this better, and it's not perfect. When we get data in, we're having to match an agency confirmation number with a supplier confirmation number. In the case of hotels, when we get a post-stay portfolio, there's not only a supplier confirmation number and an agency confirmation number, but we're also getting a hotel folio confirmation number. In the case of car rental agreements, in addition, we're also getting a car rental agreement number. All of these things have to match. I can't tell you the number of PNRs that we've seen from major airline suppliers and hotel suppliers where they provide you the base rate, taxes, et cetera, and it doesn't add up. We have to fix that too. The number of PNRs that are wrong that we have to then match, aggregate, normalize is unbelievable. Every single TMC has a different name for almost every hotel. So when we bring hotels into our system, we have to normalize all of the hotel names and turn them into one name. So if we think about what we're able to do with this kind of information and sort of think about the brand loyalty aspect of it, the ability to bring normalized hotel data to a hotel partner in support of a preferred program can become very powerful very quickly. And right now we're chasing down continuous sourcing, automated hotel population bids in some of the major RFP providers now. So we're doing a lot of work around there. I can't tell you the number of times we see PDFs from hotels that just don't open. So we have to go back and we have to get them again. So there's a lot to this to make it work, and we've come a really long way. So at a high level, this is sort of what we're doing, and of course at the risk of technology failing, here's just some screen grabs, but capturing all bookings no matter the source. So obviously in today's environment, we're seeing 20% or more shared economy. We're seeing rail that's not necessarily picked up. Obviously now content's coming out of the GDS. So the ability to get booking data no matter the source we think is very valuable. As I mentioned, we're normalizing all hotel names. This is probably the biggest one, just in terms of being able to provide leverage and be able to report to hotels on your spend and your room night production. I think I already mentioned that we're getting ride share, so we're seeing more and more. We had a little bit of a conversation at our table about it, but we're seeing more and more travel policy now become more inclusive for Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, et cetera. Aside from hotel stays, this would be one of the largest areas of duty of care. So I think it's important that we're getting this data. Right now, anything that's coming into our system, you have the ability to look and make sure that you know where your travelers are. Again, with 40% or more hotel leakage, and that being the biggest area of risk for any company. The ability to know that my traveler booked that Hilton direct, and to know where that traveler is in the event of an emergency, we think is very important. And this is it, and then we'll have lunch. So, do you believe me? Eliminating program leakage solves every problem in corporate travel. I think I've got it all. Maybe I've missed something. But if you think about real program optimization, just sort of starting and going around, if you can't track all of your travelers, can you really say you care about duty of care? Can you really say duty of care is really important if 40% plus hotels are not being booked through your TMC? If we have all of the data, don't we have a more holistic duty of care program? From a sustainability perspective, no doubt is going to be one of the largest topics at GBTA this year. But if you have program leakage and you're not solving it, can you really say that your efforts around sustainability are complete? Today, we're seeing airlines now who are very interested and willing to enter into creative incentive programs with clients if it's in support of the airline's sustainability initiatives, specifically around the sustainable airline fuel initiatives. So if you don't have all of the data to be able to present to the airline, how important is sustainability? Service. We used to argue, and this was one of my arguments, is if we're getting all of this data in, how can I service the traveler? And it's fair to say that if I book on AA.com and it's coming into the system and I can report on it, I can't necessarily affect change to that reservation. But again, consider our consumer. Our consumer doesn't care as much. If it's a simple point-to-point transaction and they've opted out and they want to book direct and it's easy, not to mention strained resources, both TMCs, airlines, hotels, everywhere, as we've mentioned, is it more important that we're trying to drive policy mandates that may or may not work, probably won't work, or is it more important to capture that data as long as we have it and we know that we can at least help that traveler in the event of an emergency? In addition, I'm seeing more and more airline examples of forcing self-service anyway. I was at a United desk the other day, a couple weeks ago. I was like, I need to change the reservation. And they said, well, why don't you use the QR code over there? Traveler satisfaction, sort of in the eye of the beholder, and I think dovetails into the service argument. What do travelers really want? does the changing consumer demographic change how we define what traveler satisfaction is? Expense, automation is directly related to traveler satisfaction, right? If 40% or more of our transactions aren't going into our expense system, are we really providing the best automated expense solution? Policy oversight. If you can't see all of the data, how can you really make smart policy decisions? And management reporting. I think it's hard to argue that if we don't have holistic data, it's very hard to look at management reporting and say that we've got everything we need to make the right decisions for our travel program. And then lastly, what we're seeing is suppliers getting very creative around the deals and discounts that they provide to travelers or to travel programs. And there's a willingness to get creative and take a more holistic approach to negotiating, primarily air and hotel contracts. So the argument that I would make is that based on the changing consumer profile in our organizations today, and based on the fact that we have the technology now that will support a more holistic data capture and more holistic data program, that by eliminating leakage, we eliminate most, if not all, problems in corporate travel. And that's why we've chased this solution. Appreciate everyone. Enjoy lunch. Thanks again to everybody.